probably thought of yourself as a musician, right? Because you're vocal music majors, and you might have even thought about yourself as a teacher or a possible teacher. I don't think any of you guys are ed majors, but that might have been a role that you thought about for yourself. Have any of you thought of yourselves as writers, or is that just a skill or a task that you are doing for class?
I actually almost majored in English before I majored in music, and that was, so I thought of myself as a writer at that time, but I guess now that I've been in college, I kind of think of it as an assignment sort of thing, so not as a writer, if that makes sense.
So I'm interested to know if you learned anything about you as a writer, or what your strengths might be, or what your weaknesses are, or anything about the writing process. And I'll just leave that open-ended question to marinate for a few seconds.
I kind of enjoyed doing the research, reading about something that I actually care about instead of doing some assignment in another class. My biggest issue was forming an actual main idea, because I had so many different things I wanted to talk about and I had no real structure, and that was my biggest issue, but I think I worked it out.
Okay.
I think one of the most important things I've learned is the validity of the resources that we use in our research. Before, I feel like the symptom is in high school or in public school, is that we are told to use books and websites, but kids can interpret that in their own ways, like just using random blogs or things that necessarily aren't valid. In the research paper that we did for you this past semester, I used strictly a research journal, and actually emailed a few professors who are using these technologies that I was talking about on my paper, and emailed them, and they emailed me back and gave me some really useful information that I used in a lot of my papers. So I don't think I once used any other, I didn't use a website unless it was to find an article in a research journal. So
websites were a major
it was
source of information in the past.
Yeah, and even in my research that I'm doing now, I've really taken that to heart, and I go to more recently published books, any kind of research journal, or any kind of primary resource. So I always go to that first, just because the information that they give is always much more rich, and you can trust that it's correct too.
Some of my sources were highly scientific. They were essentially just lab reports, and that's something that I've never really encountered before, having to figure out what everything stands for and what this graph means and what this. And so it was an interesting learning experience, figuring out how to do something that's so different from like literary criticism or a review or something like that.
Okay, going to the scientific end of things. We had, or you were supposed to do 2 revisions of your paper, right? So you had in the first draft, and then you did a first revision the fall semester, and a second revision the spring semester. What did you learn about the process or about yourself during that extended revision period that you don't normally have?
I think also having 2 sets of revisions with a lot of time in between was actually pretty helpful, just because it allowed me to look at my paper more objectively rather than this is my work. I was able to look at it as this is information that I put down on the page. How does it flow? What are the main points that I'm trying to hone in on? So I was able to look at it not so opinionated, and then make corrections based on that.
It helped with the clarity of the paper, because some of the things that I thought were important, but they weren't necessarily the most important. I would spend a lot of time detailing and discussing, and it kind of made the paper seem a little like frayed at the edges, like just kind of going off. But having to focus on, oh, these these are the most important things, really help with the flow of the overall structure.
So like,
What about the blogs? How are you feeling about the blogs, and how is that different? I mean, obviously it's different than the research paper, but
I really like doing the blogs. I like that I'm able to use my own thoughts and kind of do what I want to do and based off of my own experiences in it, and I can sort of make it my own. I don't really see it as an assignment for the most part. It's something that I look forward to doing after I get through my lesson, because I've discovered that I'm learning more and more things through my lessons, and I try to write it like at least 6 hours after I have my lesson, so everything's still fresh in my mind, and it's a thing to go back to and see how things are different from one blog post to the next blog post. So.
I actually do enjoy doing the observation write-ups more than I do the blog.
interesting. I think you might be the only person.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I mean, what the observations do is that they allow me to realize that my thoughts are not necessarily mine alone. I encounter a lot of the same problems and the same things going on in instrumental lessons as well as voice lessons, and so that writing the observations kind of helps me organize those thoughts, which are a little more, which is like new information to me. So I actually enjoy doing those more, just because I feel like I'm getting more out of it.
So,
It's all just a very useful way to organize all the random thoughts that you have going on in your brain. So it's very beneficial in that regard.
time down.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you foresee yourself using writing as a tool in your future profession?
Absolutely.
How so?
It's a goal of mine to get published in something. So.
Okay.
Well, like in my own, like when I'm practicing with myself, I think it helps. Like I started recording myself in some of my lessons sometimes because it's good to get the immediate feedback from myself, but I kind of dropped off of that for a while. But I think like writing my like thoughts and observations during the lessons would be really beneficial, because I can put all of my ideas and thoughts into on a sheet of paper instead of it all floating around in my head trying to figure out what.
You mean during the lesson and not during the practice? A practice session?
After a practice session.
After a practice session? Okay. So you think journaling the practice session would be helpful to you?
Yeah.
And we're like at an age of a lot of self-discovery, so I think journaling, just on any kind of subject, like we journal on body mapping as well, just to talk about different ways we've experienced remapping our body and the alignment and everything. Just so much is going on that it would be absolutely beneficial to just kind of write about it, just get it on paper.